Breaking tonight from the nation's capital. The Supreme Court of the United States has delivered what constitutional scholars are calling the most significant judicial rebuke of presidential power in half a century. In a stunning 7-2 decision issued late this evening, the High Court struck down multiple executive orders from President Donald Trump, declaring them unconstitutional expansions of executive authority. 3 justices appointed by Trump himself joined the majority. We go now live to our ongoing coverage. All right, so what just happened is absolutely seismic, and I'm not using that word lightly. The Supreme Court just dropped a constitutional neutron bomb on the Trump administration. In a 7-2 ruling, 7 justices, including 3 that Trump personally put on that bench, just told the President of the United States that he has been governing illegally. Think about that for a second. His own appointees looked at what he's been doing and said, "No, this isn't how America works." According to Reuters and confirmed by NPR, the court struck down Trump's executive orders claiming total authority over independent federal agencies and state National Guard units. Total authority. Those were Trump's exact words in his executive orders. He literally wrote that the president has total authority, and 7 Supreme Court justices just said, "That's not how the Constitution works. That's not how any of this works. This has never happened before in American history. Not like this. Not with a sitting president's own appointees joining a supermajority to declare his governance model unconstitutional." Let me break this down because this is complicated but incredibly important. The unsigned opinion, which means the court spoke as an institution rather than through any individual justice, invalidated Trump's directives granting himself unilateral control over independent commissions and military deployments. The decision immediately froze over 30 executive orders, 30, creating what White House insiders are describing as administrative paralysis across multiple federal departments. Legal experts are already drawing parallels to United States versus Nixon, the 1974 case that forced Nixon to release the Watergate tapes. But here's the thing. This ruling might be even more sweeping because it doesn't just address one controversy. It fundamentally rejects Trump's entire approach to presidential power. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. So here's what actually happened, and I need you to understand the full scope of this because most coverage is missing the forest for the trees. Throughout his second term, Trump has been issuing executive orders that massively expand presidential power in ways no president has ever attempted before. He claimed total authority over independent regulatory agencies like the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. These agencies are specifically designed to be insulated from political control. They regulate markets, protect consumers, and make decisions based on expertise and law, not based on what any president wants politically. But Trump issued orders saying these agencies report directly to him, that he can override their decisions, that he has complete and total authority over their operations. And here's where it gets really interesting. He also asserted the right to federalize state National Guard units and deploy them domestically without state consent. Now, there's a reason we have the Posse Comitatus Act, passed after the Civil War specifically to prevent presidents from using military forces as a domestic police force. Trump has been trying to bypass those restrictions entirely. He's claimed he can take control of Guard units from states like Oregon, Illinois, and California and use them for immigration enforcement, protest control, and other domestic operations, whether those governors agree or not. The Supreme Court just said that's unconstitutional. Full stop. According to the Washington Post, The ruling specifically halts Trump's use of state National Guard troops for domestic law enforcement operations. This has been a major flashpoint for months. Lower courts had already blocked some of these deployments, but now the Supreme Court has shut down the entire legal framework Trump was using to assert this power. In her concurrence, Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote, and I'm quoting here, "No president may nullify Congress by decree." Think about who's saying that. That's a Trump appointee, someone Trump put on the court specifically because he thought she'd be loyal to conservative principles. And she's telling him directly that he can't just issue decrees that override congressional authority. That's huge, because it shows that even justices who might be philosophically aligned with Trump recognize that what he's been doing goes too far. Chief Justice John Roberts went even further. He warned that, quote, "unchecked authority strikes at the marrow of the republic itself," end quote. The marrow of the republic. That's incredibly strong language from a Chief Justice who is known for being careful and measured. He's not prone to hyperbole. When John Roberts uses language like that, he's expressing genuine constitutional alarm. He's saying Trump's power grabs aren't just legally questionable. They're existentially threatening to American democracy itself. The practical impact is immediate and severe. White House officials told reporters that the ruling effectively suspends over 30 executive orders. That includes Trump's directives on immigration enforcement, budgetary autonomy, federal layoffs, and agency control. All of those orders are now legally invalid. Federal agencies are being forced to return to pre-order structures by week's end. Programs that have been operating under Trump's expanded authority have to stop. The entire administrative apparatus Trump built to exercise unprecedented presidential power is being dismantled by judicial order. Now, here's what nobody's talking about. The 7-2 vote itself tells you everything you need to know about how extreme Trump's position was. Supreme Court decisions on major constitutional questions are often 5-4 splits along ideological lines. But this was 7-2. The majority included all three liberal justices, Chief Justice Roberts, and Justices Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch. 3 Trump appointees voted against him. When you lose 7-2 on questions of executive power, that's the court sending an unmistakable message that you've completely exceeded your constitutional authority. Now, let me explain why this ruling is so devastating for Trump and why it matters for every single American regardless of political affiliation. Here's what most people don't understand about what's really happening. Everyone's focused on the immediate impact, the 30 suspended executive orders, the halted National Guard deployments, the administrative chaos. And all of that is important and dramatic, but the deeper significance is what this ruling says about the fundamental limits of presidential power. Because Trump has been operating on a specific theory of the presidency. He's been governing as if winning an election gives you nearly unlimited power to do whatever you want. That once you're president, you're essentially an elected dictator for 4 years. The Supreme Court just said that's completely wrong. That's not what the Constitution establishes. That entire governance model is unconstitutional. The separation of powers issues here are fundamental, and they affect every American regardless of party. The Constitution divides power among 3 branches of government. Congress makes laws. The President executes them. Courts interpret them. Each branch is supposed to check the others so no single branch becomes too powerful. That system only works if each branch stays within its lane and respects the authority of the others. Trump has been systematically violating that framework for months. He's claimed he can ignore congressional legislation he doesn't like. He's asserted the power to do things that require congressional authorization without getting that authorization. He's defied court orders and congressional subpoenas. He's treated the other branches as obstacles to be overcome rather than co-equal partners in governance. And the Supreme Court just said that's unconstitutional. The president doesn't get to decide unilaterally how much power he has. The Constitution decides, and Trump has exceeded what the Constitution allows. Whether you love Trump or hate Trump, you have to admit this ruling protects every American. Because here's the thing. Trump isn't going to be president forever. Eventually, there will be other presidents from both parties. If Trump's expansive claims of executive power had been allowed to stand, every future president could have claimed the same authority. Democratic presidents could have claimed total authority over independent agencies and deployed military forces domestically without state consent. That would have fundamentally altered the balance of power in American government permanently. By striking down Trump's claims, the Supreme Court is preventing that shift for all future administrations. The court is saying the presidency remains a limited office defined by the Constitution. Separation of powers still matters. Congress and courts can still check executive overreach. That's good for democracy, even if it's bad for Trump's immediate agenda. This is the part that should terrify everyone who cares about constitutional government. Trump and his team apparently thought they could keep pushing the boundaries of presidential power indefinitely, and the courts would let them get away with it. But the Supreme Court just drew a hard line. Now, Trump's entire governance model, which was based on unilateral executive action without congressional approval or judicial oversight, has been declared unconstitutional. White House aides are privately calling this a constitutional ambush. That language reveals how unexpected this was. They genuinely believed they could claim unlimited power and face no consequences. We're in uncharted territory now because everything Trump has accomplished in his second term has been based on asserting authority the Supreme Court just said he never legally had. The reactions to this ruling are coming in fast, and what's remarkable is how bipartisan the response has been. Even Republicans are acknowledging the significance of this decision. Senator Mitt Romney told reporters that the court has reaffirmed that no president is above the Constitution. When Mitt Romney and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are essentially saying the same thing, something extraordinary has happened. Conservative legal scholars who have generally supported strong executive power are calling this ruling correct and necessary. The Federalist Society, which helped select many of Trump's judicial nominees, released a statement noting that the decision affirms long-standing constitutional principles about a separation of powers. Even they couldn't defend what Trump was doing. That's not normal. That's a pattern of Trump pushing so far beyond legal boundaries that even his natural allies can't support him. Congressional Democrats are obviously treating this as vindication. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries called it a historic victory for the Constitution and announced plans for expanded oversight hearings. Senate Democrats are already discussing whether this ruling provides grounds for additional accountability measures. But here's what's really significant. Republican congressional leaders have been notably quiet. They're in an impossible position. They can't really defend a president who just got slapped down 7-2 by a court that includes his own appointees. But they also can't publicly criticize him without facing backlash from Trump's base. That silence speaks volumes about how indefensible Trump's position was. So what happens next? There are 3 likely scenarios, and none of them are good for the Trump administration. Scenario 1 is compliance with chaos. Trump accepts the ruling, but his administration descends into administrative paralysis as agencies scramble to figure out what policies are still valid. White House lawyers will spend weeks trying to salvage what they can within the new constraints. This is probably the most likely outcome in the short term, but it effectively cripples Trump's ability to implement his agenda through executive action. Scenario 2 is defiance. Trump attacks the Supreme Court, calls the decision illegitimate, and hints at ignoring it. This would create a full-blown constitutional crisis unlike anything we've seen since Nixon. The courts would likely respond with contempt findings. Congress would face enormous pressure to act. International allies would question American stability. The smart money says Trump's lawyers will talk him out of this option. But with Trump, you never know. He's already posted on social media calling the ruling a disgrace and politically motivated, which suggests he's at least considering defiance. Scenario 3 is escalation. Trump accepts the narrow ruling but looks for workarounds. He might try to reissue executive orders with slightly different language, test the boundaries of what the court will allow, and generally engage in a prolonged legal battle over every inch of executive authority. This could drag on for the remainder of his term, creating constant uncertainty and turning every policy decision into a potential court fight. Regardless of which scenario plays out, the pressure is building. Congressional investigations are going to intensify. Legal challenges to other Trump actions will multiply. Federal agencies are going to be extremely cautious about implementing any presidential directives that might be constitutionally questionable. And the 2026 midterms are going to be shaped by this ruling. Voters will know that even a conservative Supreme Court concluded Trump was violating the Constitution. Nobody knows exactly how this ends, but mark my words, this is just the beginning of a very turbulent period. All right, here are the key points you need to remember from this historic ruling. Point number 1. The Supreme Court ruled 7-2 that Trump's claims of total authority over independent agencies and state National Guard units are unconstitutional. 3 Trump appointees joined the majority. This is the biggest judicial check on presidential power in 50 years, comparable to United States versus Nixon. Point number 2. Over 30 executive orders are now suspended, creating immediate administrative paralysis across federal agencies. Immigration enforcement, federal layoffs, budget directives, and agency control orders are all affected. The entire apparatus Trump built to exercise unprecedented executive power is being dismantled by judicial order. Point number 3. This ruling establishes precedents that will constrain not just Trump, but all future presidents. It reaffirms that the presidency is a limited office defined by the Constitution, that separation of powers matters, and that executive orders cannot nullify congressional legislation. These principles will shape American government for generations. Point number 4. Trump's ability to govern for the remainder of his term is severely limited. He can no longer rely on unilateral executive action to implement his agenda. He'll have to work with Congress, respect independent agencies, and follow legal processes. Given his demonstrated inability to operate within those constraints, this ruling may effectively cripple his presidency. Point number 5. Additional legal challenges and congressional investigations are inevitable. Defense attorneys in political prosecution cases will argue those cases were based on authority Trump didn't legally have. Congressional oversight will intensify. The DOJ and FBI leadership will face scrutiny. This ruling opens the floodgates. Here's the bottom line, and I need you to understand how significant this moment is. The Supreme Court of the United States just told Donald Trump that he's been governing unconstitutionally. 7 justices, including 3 he personally appointed, looked at his claims of total presidential authority and said, no, that's unprecedented. That changes everything. Trump has been trying to turn the presidency into an elected dictatorship, and the highest court in the land just stopped him. They didn't do it on a narrow 5-4 vote along partisan lines. They did it with a supermajority that crossed ideological boundaries. That tells you how extreme his position was. That tells you this isn't about politics. It's about the Constitution. The next few weeks will determine whether Trump complies, defies, or finds some way to escalate this fight. But regardless of what he does, the court has spoken. Presidential power has limits. The Constitution still matters. Separation of powers still works. For everyone who's been worried about authoritarian drift in America, this ruling is proof that the system can still check executive overreach when it matters most. This story is just getting started. The fallout is going to dominate the news for weeks, maybe months. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell because things are about to get even crazier. We're going to be covering every development as it happens. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what just happened to American democracy. Stay informed, stay engaged. This is the turning point everyone's been waiting for.